everybody, welcome to another video. This week I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm just going to show you how I edit the photos using the software that I've run called RawTherapee. Have a look at this, let me know what you think. So here we are in the RawTherapee opening screen. It's probably a screen that looks slightly familiar to a lot of you, but it's not going to be completely familiar. Most people tend to use Lightroom these days. I run a Linux based system, so that option's sort of not available to me, but RawTherapee, it's an open source piece of software, completely free of charge, very powerful, has a lot of features set in there. So let's dive in and get this image opened. And there we go, you can see straight away it's brought in the information as well. I've got my 5D Mark IV with my 24-105 f4L lens, f8, 200th of a second, ISO 100, it was at 40mm. Really bright day, but really contrasted day as well. There's a lot of dark shadows coming across from the clouds, but we'll drop it off. As you can see at the moment, we've got the base set up. Starts off with the exposure tab. The exposure is not bad on this at all, actually. I mean, looking at the base histogram that we've got down there, it's not too bad. We could probably sort of lose a little bit down here, just to tidy it up a little bit right at the top end, but I don't want to do too much globally because there's a lot of areas that could do with a little bit of separation, which will actually bring the shadows and highlights in. So I'll pull the highlights up, maybe not quite that much, yeah, somewhere around there. Just soften that glare down a little bit, but you can see down in this bottom corner there's still quite a lot of glare from sort of the last of the stubble that's left from the harvest. It's not sort of grown through, but it's really catching the light quite a lot. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to add a graduated filter. Just put the control piece on there. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to just spin the control around and drop it down there. So the graduation is going to roll in from the bottom corner towards the image center there. Now I'll bring probably somewhere around 0.8 of a stop. Looks fairly good. We can just move that along a bit. Possibly just tweak that so it's affecting more this bottom corner than anything. Turn the control off. There we go. And that's dropped that. So I can flip that off. You see straight away, it's just softened that area of the corner of the image. It's just not too bad. It's only like sort of just under 0.8 of a stop lower, but it just stops that glare from coming through. Gives it a bit more of a balance on the image. The other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to drop a little bit of tone mapping on there. Now if I put that on initially, you'll see it's quite a strong effect. It sort of brings everything forward, which is not really what I'm looking at. I really want to get that down to about 0.2. So it just brings it forward, but not too strong. That's a bit better. So you've got some more of the detail coming in around the back here, but it's not overpowering. Next, I want to play with the colour balance a little bit. Now the white balance at standard is set to the one on the camera, which I took that under cloudy condition. Yeah, cloudy conditions I would say. So it come out at like 5869 Kelvin. I'm going to bump that up to somewhere around 6.5, 6.6. Just to get a little bit more of a golden hue. It just works with the feel. It's an autumnal image. That's what I'm sort of aiming for. Again, with a little bit of vibrance. Doesn't need much. Probably somewhere around 5 will be sufficient on there. Just enough to just lift it a little bit. Now the other thing I'm going to play with is the HSVs, which you can actually mess around with the hue, saturation and vibrance separately. Now the hue I'm actually going to bring a little bit too much, just a little bit more green out of it. Not too much, just that little tiny bit. Pull a little bit of the blues back a bit. And a little bit of the purples back a little bit. You'll see the difference in that. Very subtle, but it stops these areas of the blue being a little bit over the top. Also brings a little bit of the green out of the fields in the background. So it's not quite so sort of harsh yellowiness all around here, so that makes a bit of a difference. What I'll also add in there is a little bit of what they call soft light. It's like a low level contrast, but it only affects the shadows. You can actually go very extreme on it, and you'll see the effect more on these sort of background edges, but it gives quite a lot of depth on the leaves as well. But you have to be a little bit careful with how you use it. I mean, probably 25 on that is probably plenty, I would have thought. I'll just flip that so you can actually see the difference between it. So you see the end result on that. That's not too bad. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to run a local adjustment on this. It's a bit like putting the individual filters through like radials and stuff like that on Lightroom. Similar sort of effect, but this is their version of it. But what I want to do, I want to make that a rectangle. And I'll bring that up, right up into the corner, and then just drag that out and drag that down over there. Because basically what I want, I just want it to affect the sky area more than anything. Now, the graduation filter on this, it basically starts there and it'll just taper off towards this edge. So what I'm going to do, add a tool into there, colour and light, and I'm just going to bring the lightness down just that bit. You'll see literally it's more effective up in this top corner, because I don't want that to be overpowering. I want the tree to actually be the main focal point. So if I just turn that off, you'll see the difference in the sky. It just brings that down. I'm also going to pull a little bit of the chrominance down as well, so it's not quite so colourful. That's a bit more like it. So it's taking that edge away from it. Now, the other thing that you can add to that is a little bit of clarity, but I'll do that in a moment. That's actually in the wavelet stuff. And if I put sharpness and clarity on there, and just boost the radius on that a little bit. Now, I don't want to go too mad, because the thing with clarity is if you put too much on there, it really looks horrible. It really overdoes it quite badly. But play with the sliders a little bit there. Just want something nice and subtle. That's probably a little bit too strong. You'll see on these clouds here how it's accentuated the back of the cloud. It's basically just a midpoint lift in the shadows. Well, the next side of things, just drop a little bit of sharpening in. I'll pop the halo control. That's actually quite a nice feature, the halo control on this, because it stops it from overpowering. Now you'll see on there it's got 1:1, so this only really works when you're zoomed in at 1:1, so it's 100% zoom. Now if I just pop that off, you should just see a slight difference, mainly on the little bit of the twigs. Just gives that little edge, just brings it into sharp focus. Now some of the leaves are a little bit blurry, but that's because it was a really windy day. That just one of the things, if I'd up the shutter speed a little bit more, I maybe got rid of it, but it was a handheld snap at the time anyway. Noise reduction, I don't think we're really going to need to put any in there by the look of it, but I'll just bring that up. You can see a little bit, almost like sort of haziness on there. If I bring the luminous up, I don't know, maybe about 15 or so. Process. That's just softened those edges a little bit. Just gets rid of some of the specular grain that you always get from the images. What I can also do is put contrast by detail level in. If I go for a bit that's got quite a bit of detail around it, that's not too overblown, something like that. So you've got the tree in the background, you've got all these leaves and the twigs, etc. being highlighted. And if I add in, say 1.3, basically the finest detail, I add more detail, and then as the detail become coarser, they just blend out. So if I just hit that now, we should see just a slight difference. There we go. So it just brought a little bit more clarity into it, a little bit more sharpness, but it's mainly just playing with the contrast. It just gives it a little bit more depth. Now, what I'm going to do now, because it's kind of my thing really, I'm actually going to drop a vignette filter into place. There we go. That just softens those edges. Now it's a little bit harsh at the minute, so I'm going to feather that back like so. You should just see the centre moving, and just reduce its strength to say 0.3 of a stop, somewhere around there. There we go. That's just a little subtle edge, just to draw your eye down into the centre of the image more than anything. It just takes some of that edge away from the top of the clouds here. But that's not too bad. Now, with all the changes that I made, I'm actually going to increase the strength of this graduated filter down this bottom corner. Because it does need just that little bit of extra, I think. So you can see where it's off and back on. You can see it's just got that bit of edge. I might just move that up and across just a little bit. Try to grab that. So something about like that. So that gives us quite a reasonable image size. Looks quite good. I'm not sure whether I actually need to reframe that. So if I go to the crop area, what I can do, it's really handy, you can actually get some overlays. There's various different overlays that they run at with different sizes. So say I want to do this as a 4:3 image, you'll see the crop actually brings the frame in around like that. Now if I press shift and drag, I can then sort of bring that into play there. So this area over on that side will get cut out. Doesn't look too bad. Let's just try go for a 16:9 crop, see what that looks like. It might be a little bit too tall for it. Yeah, as I thought, it's a little bit too tall. So let's just go back to the standard, and I'll drop a rule of thirds grid on there because that's actually quite handy for gauging how things look. If I bring that in, that way I've got the tree actually on the right side of the 4:3, sorry, the rule of thirds grid. This bit's not too overpowering either, so it just balances the image quite nicely. And you can see how that actually then blends out at the bottom quite nicely as well. So that's not too bad. I'll switch that back to the frame on that side of things. Now, the leaf area on this still looks a little bit bright for my liking, so I'm going to go back into the locals piece. I'll just hide the frame for that. Add a new one because it puts an ellipse in straight away. And I'm just going to shape this out around the tree itself. There we go. And what I'm going to do, pull the lightness back a bit further on that. That's maybe a little bit too far. Let's bring them at minus 40. No. Let's try minus 15. That's not too bad. I'll actually drop some of the contrast back as well. There we go. So I can turn that off. You'll see it's quite a bright, harsh look to it. Turn it back on again. Let's just soften that area down. I'll actually bring this down there as well. There we go. So I'll actually sort of soften a bit more of those edges. Looks like the strength of it, it starts in the center point and works out to the edges. So it's a very sort of soft gradient that it runs. But that's not too bad. That's not too bad at all now. There we go. It does affect the background, but as long as you're subtle with it, it's not too bad. So that's not too bad at all, really. I'm still going to play with that vibrance a little bit, though, because I'm not 100% happy with that area either. I just want to pull some of the greens back so I can play with that a little bit more. Oh, too much, too much, too much. There we go. I still want to try and get some of the golden look to it, but I want to make sure that the greens are actually coming through on this lower section here, because it does help balance the image a bit more if you've not got like a full gold effect on there, because it does sort of look a little bit too over processed if you're not careful. So if I just push that one back, maybe back over this way a little bit. So the control that you've got, basically, it's like drawing a line across the spectrum. So you can actually adjust which are stronger, which are less, and actually pull it around. But really handy for sort of settling an image down. If you've got some colours that are a little bit strong, some that aren't quite strong enough, you can balance it out quite nicely. So that gives us those. It's got a feature on this called local contrast, which is quite nice. It can actually bring a lot of detail out. Obviously this one doesn't need it, but it is quite a handy little feature to have on there. But I think if I just increase the blacks just a little bit, on that, it brings a little bit more detail into that sort of area. You can actually sort of compress the highlights a little bit more as well, so bring that up a little bit. This should soften some of the highlights that are actually on the tree, but it's a bit more subtle. That's not too bad. Well, that's not too bad an edit, really. I will just push this over a little bit on this curve. So basically the bit that I've taken out with the highlights, just restoring that, just level it out again. But that's not a bad image, so I'll pop that up now for you so you can see what the full resolution looks like. So there you go, that's how I edit the photos and the sort of effects that you can get out of it. Very basic, but it gives you an insight on what it can do. Now the software is available for Windows and MacOS as well, so I'll put a link to the site in the description so you can take a look if you want to. Now sometimes I do get asked what sort of gear I use, so I did this little piece last week which shows you some of the gear that I've got with me and how I'm using it while I'm out in the field. Let me know what you think. Now my main camera is the Canon 5D Mark IV, full frame, fantastic camera, pro grade, been around for years, just stable as anything. You can throw anything you like at it, it loves it. My general sort of woodland lens or sort of landscape lens I use is a Canon f4 24-105. It's their L series lens, so it's the top line of lens. It's a really nice versatile lens. A lot of people say the 24-70 is a bit better, but I've had no trouble at all with this one at all. Certainly it's not worth paying the extra to get a very fast lens at this sort of size, because especially if you're using tripod, you're never going to use an f2.8 aperture anyway, so it's not really a problem. Now, tripod I use is an Inner carbon fibre. It's a really sturdy beast, but it's lightweight as well, so it's ideal for carrying around. It has the added bonus that it's actually got an adjustable base with a cup on it, so I don't need to worry too much about having the legs perfectly level, because I can actually level up the camera from there. Also, I don't use a ball head. I use this fairly sort of old school looking thing, which basically just lets me tilt and pan using just solid mounts rather than being the ball mount. Main reason being, if I'm using my 600mm lens, it's far too heavy for the ball mount. They just sag everywhere, so it doesn't really work out very well. Now, as far as using an L bracket, so I can actually switch to portrait quickly, it's a bit of a mismatch of parts. Normally the L bracket sits straight on the bottom of the camera, and you can sort of flip between sort of landscape orientation, turn the whole thing round, switch to portrait. You're not moving the tripod or anything like that. Normal sort of setup. But because I use a capture clip on the camera, I've had to modify this one so it actually has an Arca Swiss style mount that I can actually attach the camera to, and still then attach the camera to the capture clip while I'm carrying around. It's more of a convenience thing for me. Looks a bit quirky, but it works exactly the same as any other L bracket does. Just works well. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed the video. Something a little bit unusual for you, but hopefully you've got a bit of an insight into the software that I use and the sort of gear that I use to take the shots as well. So, if you like the video, hit the like button, comment below, hit the subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see you again on the next one.